Hey guys, tonight we're going to deep, pun intended, into the rough, dirty, often heartbreaking world of being a gold miner in the Wild West. Imagine yourself standing on the edge of a wild, untamed river, the water icy, your fingers numb, your stomach growling, and your only companion the creeping suspicion that you've made a horrible mistake. You can smell the damp earth, the sweat of desperation, and maybe the faint aroma of overcooked beans from the campfire. The mountains loom, beautiful and unforgiving, and every gust of wind feels like it's laughing at you. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Drop that in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You start with a simple dream: gold. The word itself feels heavy with promise. You imagine it glinting under the sun, piles of it stacked in a modest but tastefully opulent home somewhere far from the dusty trails of the West. Gold fever isn't just a figure of speech, it's a real, infectious hope that spreads faster than any disease, and you, my friend, have caught it. You sell off what little you own, stuff a few belongings into a bag, kiss your family goodbye, and swear you'll be back before the year is out, richer than a railroad baron. The year is around 1849. Yes, you're a 49er, and you're part of the great westward surge that has gripped the nation. Historians still argue whether it was pure greed or the desperate hunger for a better life that drove most prospectors. Maybe it's a little of both. Either way, you're not alone. Towns empty out overnight, shops close, whole families vanish, leaving only faded signs and memories behind. Everyone, it seems, is chasing the dream. Of course, no one talks about the odds. A tiny handful will strike it rich. The rest, well, the rest will fuel this legend with their quiet failures and forgotten bones. But none of that matters to you right now. You're too busy dreaming of gold nuggets so big you need two hands just to lift one. You imagine dropping them dramatically on the banker's desk, watching his monocle pop off in cartoonish disbelief. Packing is simple: a pickaxe, a pan, maybe a shovel. If you're lucky, you've got a mule who hates you and shows it every step of the way. You'll need clothes, but don't expect fashion. It's wool and leather, itchy and heavy, and it smells suspiciously like it came off the last guy who failed at this whole enterprise. What you can't pack is a guarantee. Not a guarantee of success, safety, or even survival. But hey, you're full of youthful optimism, or maybe just full of bad decisions, and either way, you're going. You board a creaking wagon or hitchhike with a caravan of other hopefuls. The mood is high. Everyone's talking about the latest rumors: big strike in the Sierra Nevadas, rich veins in the hills of California. All you gotta do is scoop it up off the ground, says some guy with questionable dental hygiene, and you believe him because you want to. There's a popular story about a man who supposedly picked up a rock to throw at a bird, and voila, there was gold under it. Historians still argue whether that was a metaphor or a flat-out lie, but you tuck the tale into your heart like a lucky charm. As the wheels jolt and clatter over rutted trails, you watch the landscape change. Flat plains give way to rugged hills, hills to jagged mountains. Towns grow sparser until there's nothing but endless sky and the whispering grass. You're leaving behind civilization, or at least its better bits, and heading into something far less certain. The days are hot, the nights freezing. Your bed is the hard ground, your blanket a threadbare thing that mocks the idea of warmth. If you're very lucky, you won't freeze, starve, or be eaten by wolves before you even see a river to pan. No one really tells you that part. You start to wonder, bouncing endlessly in the wagon seat, how bad it can really be. After all, you think, you're clever, hard-working, maybe even a bit lucky. You'll find your gold in no time, won't you? As the horizon swallows the last hints of your old life, you clutch your pickaxe a little tighter. The metal feels reassuringly solid in your hands, something real, something that doesn't vanish into dust the way dreams sometimes do. You tell yourself you're ready, ready for anything. Spoiler alert, you're not. The journey west isn't a leisurely sightseeing trip. No, it's a teeth-rattling, patience-shredding, soul-wilting trek that makes you question all your life choices by the second day. The wagon jolts over every rut, every rock, every invisible bump, until you feel like your spine's been replaced by a string of cracked beads. You think about how, back home, you used to complain about cobblestone streets. Cute, right? At first, the landscape is deceptively friendly. Wide plains stretching endlessly under a big blue sky. But it doesn't stay friendly for long. The grass thins, the water grows scarce, and the sun seems to hang lower and heavier in the sky, beating down on your neck like it has a personal grudge. You quickly learn to drink the water sparingly, if you can find any. Ponds shimmer invitingly in the distance, only to reveal themselves as cruel mirages. It's a practical joke Mother Nature never seems to get tired of playing. Food is another matter. Whatever you packed, it wasn't enough. Beans, hardtack, maybe some jerky if you're feeling fancy. Forget fresh fruits and vegetables. Those are distant memories, along with things like hot baths and dry socks. Meals are a gritty affair, often shared with the buzzing flies that seem to have unionized just to torment you. Historians still argue whether most travelers understood how long and grueling the trip would be before they set out. Judging by the sheer volume of discarded belongings littering the trails, furniture, dishes, even entire wagons, you'd guess not. The roads westward became veritable graveyards of hope, a path lined with the tangible evidence of dreams abandoned in haste. Speaking of graveyards, you quickly get acquainted with the concept of roadside burials. Cholera, dysentery, accidents, you name it, the trail has 1,000 creative ways to kill you. Some nights, as you sit by a meager fire and gnaw on whatever sorry excuse for food you've scrounged, you hear the low moan of wind across the prairie and wonder if it's the earth itself mourning the endless line of souls it has claimed. And the weather? A whole other level of cruel. Blistering heat by day, icy winds by night. Then there are the dust storms, where the sky turns a sickly yellow and the air fills with sand so thick you can't see your own hands. You cough, you sneeze, you blink furiously. None of it helps. When it finally clears, you're coated in grime, tasting grit between your teeth for days. If you think rivers are a welcome sight, think again. Rivers mean fording, and fording means drowning if you're not careful, or even if you are. You watch in horror as wagons tip, supplies vanish, and people are swept away. The water looks harmless until it's not. There's even a popular grim joke among travelers. You can always tell a drowned man, he's the one smiling. By the time you reach the foothills, your body aches in places you didn't even know had nerves. Your boots are worn thin. Your feet are a patchwork of blisters and bruises. Your hands are chapped and cracked from days of gripping rough reins and digging out wagons mired in the mud. Sleep, when it comes, is a temporary death, deep, dreamless, and never quite enough. And yet, you push on. Why? Maybe it's the stories you hear around the campfires, tales of men who struck it rich overnight, who plucked gold from riverbeds like apples from a tree. Or maybe it's sheer stubbornness, that trait you never appreciated until now, keeping you upright when every rational part of you screams to turn back. You start to realize there's a grim solidarity among your fellow travelers. Strangers become companions. A nod, a shared meal, a mumbled joke about the latest catastrophe. It's the social glue holding this miserable, dust-caked parade together. You trade tips, how to mend a wheel with twine, how to spot snake holes before you step in them, How to tell edible berries from the ones that will leave you retching for hours. Quirky fact time. Some desperate souls tried to bring their pianos west. Pianos! Imagine lugging a 600-pound box of misery across mountains. Historians still argue whether that was insane optimism or just plain insanity. Spoiler, most of those pianos got left behind. Lonely monuments to crushed dreams. By the time you see the first glinting peaks of the Sierra Nevada, or whatever mountain range guards your promised gold, you're a different person. Tougher, yes. Hungrier, absolutely. A little more cynical, a little less naive. You understand now that the West isn't handing out fortunes for free. It's daring you to try. You tighten your belt, adjust your pack, and squint into the setting sun. The mountains loom ahead, vast and indifferent. Behind you lies the long, hard trail. And ahead? Well, ahead there's only more uncertainty. But you've come this far. What's a few more miles? You finally arrive, or at least you arrive somewhere. There's no welcoming committee, no triumphant brass band playing as you stride into town. In fact, calling it a town is generous. It's more like someone sneezed out a handful of tents, slapped a welcome sign into the mud, and called it a day. This is your new home, a tent city, one of hundreds mushrooming all over the gold fields. At first glance, it looks temporary. Canvas tents flap in the wind, tied down with rocks or broken branches. The ground is a patchwork of mud, discarded trash, and the occasional suspicious puddle that you learn quickly to avoid at all costs. There's no pavement, no sidewalks, just a churned-up mess where boots and wagon wheels have fought a losing battle against the elements. Your tent, assuming you can even secure one, is about the size of a coffin standing on its end and smells eerily similar. Inside, it's just enough room to lay down a bedroll, stack a few precious supplies, and hang a lantern that sputters more than it glows. Privacy? Cute concept. But here, it's an endangered species. You can hear your neighbor snoring, talking in his sleep, even the gurgling of his stomach after yet another meal of overcooked beans. At night, the wind whistles through the thin canvas, carrying with it a symphony of coughing, muttering, and the occasional gunshot, because of course, there's no law here yet. You might clutch your pickaxe a little tighter as you drift into a shallow, uneasy sleep, hoping you're not the next unlucky soul to get robbed blind, or worse, before morning. Historians still argue whether these tent towns should even be called towns. Some argue they were more like opportunistic huddles of humanity, springing up faster than infrastructure could catch up. Either way, they're places of hope and despair, jumbled together in equal, uncomfortable measure. Daily life here is a comedy of discomforts. Water is a rare luxury, hauled in by bucket from dubious sources. The bathrooms, if you can call them that, are little more than trenches dug hastily behind the tents. The less said about those, the better. Just mind where you step, especially at night. As for food, unless you're lucky enough to be near a trading post, or foolish enough to trust mystery stew from the local cook, you're on your own. Most meals are grim affairs of hardtack, dried beans, and salted pork so tough you could patch a tent with it. Vegetables are mythical. Fresh meat, unless you count questionable cuts from wandering animals, is almost unheard of. Speaking of animals, rats and mice are not just common, they're your new housemates. They chew through anything even vaguely edible and will happily scurry over your sleeping face if you leave a crumb out. Some enterprising miners have taken to keeping, but hey, it's not all bad. Occasionally, someone manages to erect a rough saloon, usually little more than a tent with a plank of wood for a bar. Inside, you can get a shot of something that smells like paint thinner and burns twice as hard going down. It's liquid courage for those heading back to the dig sites and liquid regret for those who overindulge. Quirky tidbit? In some camps, enterprising individuals set up makeshift theaters, staging impromptu performances ranging from Shakespearean drama, badly, to less reputable forms of entertainment. Historians still argue whether these shows provided a much-needed cultural escape or just another excuse to part miners from their hard-earned, or hard-lost, money. The lawlessness is part of the charm, until it's not. Disputes are settled with fists, knives, or bullets, and there's no sheriff to call if things get ugly. It's understood. You mind your business, keep your mouth shut, and maybe, just maybe, you'll survive long enough to dig another day. Social life? Well, you bond with your fellow miners over shared misery. Gossip travels faster than gold dust in the wind. Who struck it rich? Who didn't? Who was caught cheating at cards? Who went missing after a trip to the saloon and was last seen arguing over a disputed claim? Friendships are fleeting but fierce, forged in the crucible of mutual hardship and mistrust. As you huddle in your miserable tent, you wonder if this is really better than the life you left behind. You wonder how many others are lying awake, asking themselves the same question. And yet, come morning, you'll lace up your worn boots, grab your battered tools, and trudge back out to the diggings. Because somewhere, just maybe, there's a gold nugget with your name on it. Your tools are as much a part of you now as the blisters on your hands, though they offer about the same amount of comfort. The pickaxe, shovel, and gold pan you carry feel sturdy at first, almost like old friends. But give it a week, or even a day, and they'll betray you like all fair-weather companions do. Let's start with the pickaxe. It's your go-to tool for hacking into stubborn ground, splintering rock, and occasionally defending yourself if some claim jumper gets too bold. Swinging it all day under the blistering sun feels a lot like slow-motion self-destruction. It weighs more with every hour until your arms are noodles, your back screams, and you start to seriously consider if gold is worth your lumbar discs. Next up, the shovel. Romanticized in all those illustrations back east, it's really just a splinter-riddled stick of suffering. Shoveling in the dry season is like trying to dig through concrete. In the wet season, it's more like a battle against sticky, soul-sucking mud that clings to the blade and refuses to let go. You spend more time cursing and scraping mud off than you do making actual progress. Then there's the gold pan, the crown jewel of futility. You scoop a mess of river sediment into it, squat down with a backache brewing, and start the tedious process of swirling water around, washing away the lighter dirt in hopes that heavier gold flakes will settle at the bottom. It's the Wild West equivalent of buying a lottery ticket with extra steps and a higher risk of frostbite. Historians still argue whether gold panning was ever truly effective or just an early form of exercise disguised as economic opportunity. Sure, someone found a nugget or two once, but for the majority, the pan yields nothing but wet sand and shattered dreams. When, if you graduate to more advanced tools, like the rocker box or sluice, you realize quickly that bigger equipment just means bigger disappointment. Rocker boxes need a constant water source, sluices demand cooperation from the river, and both have a terrible habit of falling apart exactly when you think you're making progress. And the cost? Outrageous. You likely spent most of your meager savings just getting the basics. Need a replacement pickaxe head? That'll be half your monthly earnings. Rope? As expensive as fine silk. A new pair of boots to replace the ones that now look like chewed leather? You might as well try panning for unicorns. Quirky fact for you, some desperate miners tried using their frying pans when gold pans broke or got stolen. Imagine crouching by a freezing river, swirling muddy water in your breakfast skillet while cursing your life choices. Not exactly the stuff of epic frontier legends. Maintenance is a joke. Handles split, metal bends or rusts, and every nail or rivet feels like a precious, endangered species. You improvise repairs with scraps of leather, bits of cloth, or a few choice swear words. Worse still, you're often forced to share tools. Communal pans, communal picks, which means you're not just battling the elements and bad luck, but also every cough, sneeze, and grime-streaked hand from the camp. Sanitation wasn't exactly top priority, and let's just say hand sanitizer was about 150 years and a pandemic away. The real kicker? Even with all this miserable effort, the yield is laughable. If you find a few flakes after a week of backbreaking work, you're considered lucky. And flakes don't buy much, maybe a stale loaf of bread or a night's rest in a less flea-infested cot. Historians still debate whether miners stuck it out because of sunk cost fallacy or sheer stubbornness. You've invested so much, time, money, health, that the idea of quitting feels worse than slogging on. So you keep hammering, shoveling, swirling, convincing yourself that the next pan, the next dig, the next swing might be the one that changes everything. Meanwhile, your body slowly mutinies. Calluses split open, turning your hands into maps of old battlefields. Your nails break, your shoulders ache constantly. And let's not even talk about your back. At this point, it's less a functional part of your anatomy and more a distant, painful memory. And yet, every morning, you wake up, limp to the river or the dig site, and repeat the same miserable process. Because even when common sense tells you to quit, gold fever whispers sweetly in your ear, "Just one more try." And you listen, fool that you are. You spend your days hunched over the river, pan in hand, swirling muck and gravel under a merciless sun. Every muscle aches, every joint protests, but you keep at it because today might be the day. Spoiler, it's not. Finding gold isn't just difficult, it's nearly impossible. The rivers, mountains, and valleys don't care about your dreams. You dig, you pan, you dig some more, and what do you find? A glimmer? A sparkle? No. More often than not, it's mica, fool's gold. Looks right in the pan, flashes just like the real thing in the sunlight. But when you pick it up and examine it closer, you realize it crumbles to dust under pressure, just like your hopes. Historians still argue whether the discovery rates were even remotely worth the human cost. Sure, the legends love to tell you about the lucky few who found nuggets the size of your fist. But for every lucky strike, there were thousands of yous kneeling in muck, chasing illusions day after day. The earth doesn't yield her treasures easily. Sometimes you follow rumors. There's gold up past the ridge, you hear? You pack up, hike for miles through rough terrain, battling mosquitoes the size of your thumb and rivers determined to drown you, only to find nothing. Well, not nothing. You might find bones of the last poor soul who believed the same rumor. There's a grim joke passed around campfires. The only reliable thing you'll find out here is disappointment, and maybe a dead mule or two. The bigger operations, the ones with heavy machinery and deep pockets, do better. They can afford hydraulic mining, blasting whole hillsides into slurry. You, meanwhile, have a shovel with a wobbly handle and a back screaming for retirement. Even if you had the equipment, you couldn't compete. The easy gold near the surface was scooped up in the first wave of fortune seekers. Now it's hard rock mining, dangerous, slow, and expensive. Quirky fact: desperate miners sometimes tried panning not just riverbeds, but the cracks in tree bark, old anthills, and even the dust at the bottom of their tents. Gold dust did travel, they argued, and maybe, just maybe, a breeze had delivered riches right to their doorstep. Spoiler, it hadn't. Some miners swore by divining rods, sticks said to point the way to gold. Historians still argue whether these were sincere beliefs or just elaborate jokes played by bored men on the edge of madness. Either way, you find yourself glaring suspiciously at every crooked stick you pass, just in case it's hiding secrets. There's no science to it, just luck and endless labor. And even when you find a few flakes, it's never enough. A few grams of gold won't buy you passage home. It barely buys you another few miserable meals and the faintest, cruelest glimmer of hope, enough to keep you tethered to this brutal cycle. Meanwhile, nature mocks you at every turn. Mosquitoes bite your face, black flies find every patch of exposed skin. The sun bakes your scalp until your hair feels brittle and your skin peels in sheets. Your fingernails are permanently caked with grime. You learn to live with the constant smell of sweat and river mud, which never really washes off no matter how many dips you take in the freezing water. Every so often, someone in camp strikes it rich, or claims to. They vanish overnight, leaving behind an empty tent and a lot of unanswered questions. Did they really find gold? Were they robbed on the trail out? Did they make it home and live like kings, or are they just another skeleton on the long road back east? You don't know. No one does. But the stories keep you going. The whispered legends of massive finds, of fortunes made overnight, are the fuel that powers your weary muscles and battered spirit. Historians still debate whether these stories were mostly truth or mostly fantasy. They agree on one thing though. Hope, however faint, was the real currency out here. Gold was just the excuse. And so, you dig, you pan, you dream. You squint at every sparkle in the mud, daring to believe. Because what else is there to do? Go home empty-handed and admit defeat? Not a chance. No, you think, swirling the water one more time, watching the grains dance in the pan. Maybe tomorrow.
As if the land itself weren't hostile enough, you have to watch out for a different kind of predator, the two-legged kind. Claim jumpers, those delightful fellows, are everywhere, lurking like vultures in human form. They watch, they wait, and the second you find anything even remotely shiny, they swoop in to liberate it from you. Out here, there are no deeds, no tidy government records protecting your little patch of misery. It's all staked with wooden posts, a hasty pile of rocks, maybe your old battered boots marking the corners if you're fancy. And even then, possession is 10/10 of the law. If you step away for too long, even to answer nature's call, you might return to find some opportunistic soul digging away at your spot, grinning like he invented the place. Historians still argue whether the lawlessness was inevitable or merely the result of greed outpacing governance. Either way, out here, law is spelled G-U-N. If you want to keep your claim, you better be prepared to defend it with fists, knives, or pistols. And since everyone else is equally desperate and equally armed, these confrontations rarely end with a polite handshake. The tactics are as dirty as the river mud. Some claim jumpers wait until nightfall, sneaking into your sight under cover of darkness. Others are bolder, sauntering up in broad daylight and simply declaring your claim theirs now, thank you very much. And if you disagree, well, that's what revolvers are for. Quirky fact, some miners rigged bizarre traps around their claims. Tripwires, hidden pits, even strings tied to makeshift alarms, like tin cans filled with pebbles. It was the 1850s version of a home security system, minus the reliability. Historians still debate how effective these measures were. One thing's for sure, though. Waking up to the sound of clattering cans was enough to shave a few years off your life. And don't think it's just strangers you have to worry about. Sometimes it's your own campmates. Trust is thinner than your last gold flake, and alliances shift faster than river currents. One day you're sharing a pot of beans. The next, you're staring down the barrel of a gun wielded by the guy who just yesterday offered to split firewood with you. You start to sleep with one eye open, your pickaxe or pistol within arm's reach. Every sound in the night, every snap of a twig, every whisper of canvas sets your nerves jangling. It's not paranoia if they really are out to get you. And yet, you can't leave your claim undefended. It's your life, your future, your ticket out of this mud-splattered nightmare. So you guard it like a dragon hoarding a very unimpressive treasure pile, all while wondering if tonight will be the night someone tries to take it from you. Historians still argue whether the West was won by grit or gunpowder.
Watching your neighbor sling a rifle over his shoulder as casually as a canteen, you start to think it was probably both. Fights break out regularly. A fist fight over a boundary marker can escalate to a knife fight or worse before you can blink. The camp doesn't really have rules for this sort of thing. Winner takes the claim, loser takes a dirt nap. Occasionally, a hastily formed miners' court will hold a hearing, which usually involves shouting, a few illiterate ballots, and someone getting thrown in a makeshift jail, basically a tent with an angry man outside holding a shotgun. The real kicker, even if you win, if you fight off the claim jumpers, if you survive the betrayals, if you somehow hold on to your little patch of barren dirt, there's still no guarantee there's any gold under it. You could be defending a worthless piece of ground with your life, and you probably are. But like everyone else out here, you're too stubborn to admit it. You tell yourself it's all worth it, that the sleepless nights, the constant vigilance, the creeping exhaustion will all pay off when you finally find that big score. And besides, what's the alternative? Walking away? Giving up? You didn't come all this way to quit now. So you stay. You guard your worthless patch of mud with a ferocity that surprises even you. And when the morning mist rises over the camp, and the first weak rays of sun hit your battered pan, you're already back at it. Because out here, you either cling to hope, or you get swallowed whole.
Day after day, you labor under the unforgiving sun, moving mountains, or at least very stubborn hills, one shovelful at a time. You claw through gravel, river silt, and clay that might as well be concrete, breaking your body for the faintest chance at a glint of gold. It's not like the earth makes it easy. She hides her treasures deep, protected by back-breaking labor and, apparently, a dark sense of humor. You start early, before the sun has fully cleared the horizon, hoping to get a few hours of work in before the heat turns the camp into a slow roasting oven. Your pickaxe swings in a monotonous rhythm. Dig, lift, toss, repeat. Your muscles scream in protest, your skin blisters under the merciless rays, and your hands develop calluses on top of calluses. You don't so much walk anymore as hobble, an aching, stooped-over shuffle that makes you look twice your age. And what's your reward for all this torment? A few flecks of gold, if you're lucky. Enough to fill the palm of your hand over several days, if the gold gods are feeling generous, which they rarely are. Historians still argue whether the average miner ever really broke even after accounting for the cost of supplies, tools, food, and the occasional trip to the nearest shady saloon to drown your sorrows. It's demoralizing, really. You shovel what feels like a ton of dirt, pan it carefully, swirl it, study it, and find nothing. Day after day, it's the same. You don't strike gold, you strike dirt, fatigue, and a creeping sense of futility. The river mocks you with its constant gurgling, as if it knows the gold you dream of is long gone, carried downstream decades ago by luckier hands. Quirky fact, desperate miners sometimes carried their gold pans around like security blankets, even when not working, hoping that proximity might somehow summon the elusive gold. Historians still debate whether this was superstition or sheer desperation, but either way, it didn't help. Gold isn't a puppy. It doesn't come when called. What makes it worse is seeing others, those rare, infuriating few, who seem to strike it rich overnight. You hear the whoops of joy, see the clusters of curious onlookers gathering around as someone pulls a nugget from the mud the size of a chicken egg. They celebrate with cheap whiskey, loud laughter, and promises of a better life. And you, muddy and exhausted, smile stiffly and tell yourself, "Next time, it'll be me." But it never is. And then the weather. Oh, the weather. It's not just a background inconvenience, it's a full-blown enemy. When it rains, it doesn't drizzle pleasantly. It pours, turning the dig site into a slippery death trap. Your boots sink into mud so thick and greedy it feels like it's trying to steal your soul through your soles. When the sun shines, it bakes the earth into a crust so hard it shatters your pickaxe and your will to live. Historians still argue whether miners' resilience was a product of necessity or pure stubbornness, probably both, because it certainly isn't common sense keeping you here, slogging through misery day after endless day. Your body pays the price. Your shoulders knot into painful lumps. Your knees pop and groan like creaky wagon wheels. Your skin cracks and bleeds from sunburn and exposure. And yet, somehow, you adapt. You develop a kind of numb endurance, the ability to keep going even when every fiber of your being screams to stop. There are moments, brief, fleeting moments, when you question everything. Why did you come? What are you hoping to find? Is the gold really worth it? But you silence those thoughts quickly. Out here, doubt is more dangerous than rattlesnakes. Instead, you focus on the work. Dig, pan, repeat. A monotonous grind that becomes its own grim meditation. You dream of gold as you fall asleep. You chase it in your restless dreams. You wake up aching and start all over again. The truth is, the gold rush isn't about gold at all. It's about hope. The wild, irrational belief that despite all odds, despite all evidence to the contrary, you will be the one who gets lucky. You will be the exception to the rule. You will strike it rich and prove everyone back home wrong. And so you keep digging. You keep panning. Because what else is there? Giving up isn't an option. Not yet. Maybe tomorrow.
If the grueling labor and ever-present threat of theft don't get you, disease just might. Out here, hygiene is not a priority. It's not even a concept. You wash in the same river you pan for gold. The same river upstream where someone's horse just did what horses do. Drinking the water is an act of desperation and blind optimism. Boiling it would be smart, but who has the time or the firewood to spare? It's no surprise, then, that dysentery becomes your unwelcome companion. One minute you're feeling a little off, the next you're sprinting or hobbling in a panic toward the woods, hoping to beat the inevitable. It's a game you can't win. Dehydration sets in fast, and without proper care, you're lucky if you last a week. Historians still argue whether more miners died from disease or accidents, but either way, the figures are grim. Cholera sweeps through camps like a scythe through wheat. Typhoid fever makes an appearance now and then, just to keep things interesting. And let's not forget the old reliable, scurvy. With fresh produce rarer than a trustworthy poker hand, your diet ensures your gums swell, your teeth loosen, and you get to enjoy a slow, painful decline. There's a grim sort of humor among miners. When someone drops dead of dysentery or scurvy, a common send-off is, "At least he beat the odds. He found something out here." A terrible joke, but you find yourself chuckling anyway, because if you don't laugh, you might never stop crying. Medical help? Good luck with that. Doctors, if you can find one, are often little better than quacks. Their tools are terrifying: saws, knives, and bottles of alcohol. And their treatments are worse. Got a fever? Here, have a dose of mercury. Feeling weak? Let's try bloodletting. Coughing up blood? Must be your humor's out of balance. Better drink some turpentine. Quirky fact, one miner turned doctor reportedly cured dysentery with a mix of brandy and gunpowder. Historians still argue whether this was desperation, bravado, or the early makings of a truly horrifying cocktail. Injury is another constant threat. A simple cut from a jagged rock can fester into a life-threatening infection. A twisted ankle can strand you far from camp, where help won't arrive in time, if it arrives at all. You learn quickly to bandage your own wounds with whatever you have handy. Strips of old shirts, bits of leather, even moss if you're feeling rustic. The graveyard grows steadily. Simple wooden crosses sprout like weeds around the outskirts of camp. Some have names, many don't. There's no ceremony, just a hasty hole dug in rocky ground, a few muttered words, and a boot to cover the grave with dirt. Life moves fast out here, and death moves faster. You adapt, as you must. You drink the water cautiously, filtering it through cloth if you have any. You hoard whatever stale, shriveled vegetables you can find, gnawing on them like a starving rat. You avoid the worst of the camps, the ones where disease runs rampant and the air itself seems to hum with contagion. You try not to think about the odds. Historians still argue about the psychological toll of these conditions. Was it sheer willpower that kept miners going, or was it the stubborn refusal to admit defeat? You're not sure. All you know is that you keep waking up, keep slogging through the mud, keep panning that river, because giving up feels like dying a little faster. And despite it all, life in camp carries on. Newcomers arrive, fresh-faced and hopeful, and you wonder how long it will take before the grime, the hunger, and the sickness wear them down into something that looks more like you. When you lie down at night, if you're lucky enough to be healthy for now, you listen to the sounds of the camp, the coughing, the low murmurs, the occasional cry of pain. You pull your threadbare blanket tighter around you and squeeze your eyes shut, willing yourself to sleep. Tomorrow, you'll wake up and do it all again, because out here, survival is the only certainty.
If disease doesn't grind you down, the weather will. You quickly learn that Mother Nature, in all her majestic beauty, has a sadistic streak. There's no such thing as a nice day out here, only varying degrees of discomfort and peril. You wake up with frost on your blankets one morning, and by noon, you're sweating so hard you'd swear you could wring a river from your shirt. Rain, when it comes, doesn't fall gently. It slams into the earth with the enthusiasm of a mob at a general store giving away free boots. The ground turns to a slurry of mud that clings to your boots like it's trying to drag you underground. Your tent, of course, because why wouldn't it? Every drop finds its way through some invisible seam or tear, plopping onto your forehead just as you drift into something resembling sleep. Floods are a particular favorite trip. You're panning away in what was a nice, manageable stream yesterday, but today it's a raging torrent, sweeping away pans, picks, and miners who aren't quick enough. You hear stories of men who disappeared downstream, their bodies never recovered. The river giveth, and the river taketh away. Historians still argue whether the mining camps were placed out of sheer desperation, or if miners genuinely believed they could tame these wild landscapes. The camps were usually set close to water for easy access to panning and sluicing sites, but that meant constant exposure to floods and mosquitoes the size of sparrows. Then there's the wind. A nice breeze? Think again. The wind here is a howling, dust-choked monster that scours your skin raw and leaves your mouth full of grit. When a dust storm kicks up, the entire camp vanishes in a swirling maelstrom of sand and debris. Visibility drops to inches, and you stumble blindly, coughing and swearing, tripping over rocks, tent stakes, and the occasional equally lost miner. Summer brings a heat so oppressive that the very air seems to vibrate. The sun hangs overhead like a cruel overseer, bleaching the landscape into a washed-out wasteland. You can feel your skin cooking. You can smell it too. Hats are a must, wide-brimmed and battered, but even they offer little relief. Shade is a myth, like bountiful gold or honest poker games. And then there's winter. Oh, winter. Snow falls thick and heavy, blanketing the landscape in blinding white. Tents collapse under the weight. Fires sputter and die in the wet air. Frostbite isn't just a risk, it's practically a guarantee if you're not careful. You learn to recognize the danger signs, the numbness,
the pale, waxy skin that doesn't hurt anymore because the nerve endings have given up. Quirky fact, some miners wore 2 pairs of socks stuffed with straw in a desperate attempt to stave off frostbite. Historians still debate whether it was effective or just another layer of false hope. Either way, it's better than nothing, and out here, better than nothing is as good as it gets. The seasons aren't polite about their transitions. There's no gentle glide from summer to fall. One day you're sweating through your shirt, and the next you're chipping ice out of your water barrel with a pickaxe. Spring is just as cruel. Melting snow turns the camps into lakes of muck, and every step becomes a gamble between trudging and full-on sinking. You adjust as best you can. You patch holes in your tent with whatever scraps you can find. You learn to tie everything down with extra rope to keep it from blowing away in the night. You build crude windbreaks from logs and stones, though the wind often laughs at your efforts and simply tears them apart. Historians still argue whether the brutal conditions hardened miners or simply weeded out the unlucky ones. You suspect it's a bit of both. You've seen strong men break after one bad winter, packing up and limping back east. You've also seen scrawny teenagers tough it out, their stubbornness harder than any frost. At night, the wind howls through camp, rattling tents and carrying with it the scent of wood smoke, damp earth, and something wilder, an ancient, uncaring presence that reminds you just how small and temporary you are out here. You pull your thin blanket tighter around your shoulders and try to find a warm spot in the bedding, your breath puffing out in tiny clouds. Tomorrow promises more mud, more dust, more scorching sun, or biting cold. And you'll be there, shovel in hand, ready, or at least resigned, to face it all again. Because, what choice do you have?
If the wilderness doesn't kill you, there's always the other miners. Life in the camps is less Little House on the Prairie and more survival of the sketchiest. These rough-and-tumble mining settlements are breeding grounds for every kind of vice and villainy you can imagine, and a few you probably can't. You see it right away. The saloons spring up first, canvas-roof dens of sin where bad whiskey flows like muddy water, and card games run hotter than the desert sun. The tables are crooked, the dealers even more so, and the rule is simple. If you can't spot the sucker at the table, it's probably you. Historians still argue whether mining camps were truly anarchic or just the inevitable consequence of throwing a bunch of desperate, heavily armed men into a lawless situation and shaking vigorously. What you see, though, leaves little room for debate. These places are the rough drafts of hell. Crime is a fact of life. Petty theft is rampant. Bigger crimes like assault, murder, and good old-fashioned claim jumping are just part of the landscape. If you turn your back, your supplies vanish. If you win at cards, you better watch your six walking home. Arguments end with fists, knives, or bullets more often than words. And yet, here you are, weaving your way through the muddy streets, boots sticking with every step, dodging drunken brawlers, and keeping your hat low over your face. You hold on to your meager gold dust pouch like it's your only child, because in a way, it is. Quirky fact, some enterprising crooks set up fake supply stores or saloons that would vanish overnight, along with your gold and your dignity. They were the pop-up shops of the Wild West, if you will, except instead of overpriced coffee, you got fleeced for everything you owned. The law, if it exists, is usually a loose coalition of miners acting as ad hoc judges and juries. They call themselves vigilance committees, but really, it's mob justice in its rawest form. A man accused of stealing might find himself hanging from a tree before sunset. No trial, no lawyer, just a rope and a short prayer. Historians still argue whether this frontier justice was necessary or just another brand of lawlessness. You, huddled by your campfire, figure it's best not to find out firsthand. The nights are the worst. By day, at least you can see trouble coming. At night, the shadows stretch long, and every crackle of twigs sets your heart racing. You sleep lightly, hand resting on your pickaxe, or, if you're lucky enough to own one, a rusted revolver. Trust is in short supply. Friendships are transactional. Alliances are temporary. You share a drink with a man tonight, only to find him trying to swindle you out of your claim tomorrow. There's a saying around camp, the only thing cheaper than gold is loyalty. Entertainment is scarce and usually suspect. Besides the saloons, there are gambling tents, makeshift brothels, and the occasional traveling performer foolish enough to think he can make a living off singing or storytelling in a den of thieves and cutthroats. Performers are sometimes paid in gold dust, sometimes in punches. And yet, in some strange way, this chaos forms a kind of society. There are unwritten rules. Don't cheat too openly, don't steal from the wrong person, and whatever you do, don't make enemies unless you're ready to finish what you start. It's a delicate balance of fear and necessity that holds the camps together like frayed rope, just one strong tug away from snapping. Historians still debate whether these mining camps laid the groundwork for real communities or were doomed from the start. Some camps eventually grow into towns with real buildings, real roads, even real sheriffs. Others dissolve into dust and broken dreams when the gold runs out or when a particularly nasty winter or cholera outbreak sweeps through. For now, though, you trudge carefully through the maze of tents and lean-tos, gold pouch tucked close, eyes sharp. You avoid the dice games, the card tables, the brawls spilling into the muddy alleys. You've learned to move quietly, to sleep lightly, to trust no one. Because out here, the biggest threat isn't nature or bad luck, it's your fellow man.
Even if you somehow survive disease, weather, and crime, your next enemy is subtler but no less deadly: prices. Everything you need costs a small fortune. Ironic, considering you're here to find one. The moment you stepped foot into camp, your wallet, or what's left of it, became fair game for the local price gougers. A single egg? That'll be worth more than what you can dig up in a day. Coffee? Liquid gold, priced accordingly. Boots? You might as well trade a kidney. A basic pickaxe could cost upwards of a month's earnings, assuming you find gold in the first place, which, spoiler alert, you probably won't. Historians still argue whether these sky-high prices were pure greed or simple supply and demand economics. After all, it's not easy hauling sacks of flour and barrels of whiskey over mountain ranges and across deserts. Either way, you're the one paying, and you pay dearly. You start to get creative, or desperate. You stretch your beans with river water, which somehow manages to make them taste even worse. You patch your boots with bits of canvas or strips from worn-out shirts. Soap becomes a rare luxury. Washing your clothes is almost laughably out of reach. You wear the same grimy outfit until it's stiff with dirt and sweat, and then you wear it some more. Food is the worst of it. Fresh produce? Practically mythical. Meat? Mostly salted pork, tough enough to break teeth, if you're lucky. Otherwise, you subsist on beans, bread so hard you have to soak it, and coffee grounds recycled 3 or 4 times until they resemble dirty water more than a beverage. Quirky fact: some miners tried their hand at baking damper bread, a crude mix of flour and water cooked on a flat rock near the fire. Historians still debate whether it was a culinary innovation or just desperation dressed up as tradition. Trading becomes the norm. If you have anything remotely valuable, spare tools, extra boots, a bottle of whiskey, you're suddenly a minor baron. Deals happen in hushed tones and handshakes, often under cover of night, because a man with something to trade is a man with something to steal. Even mail, that slim tether back to the civilized world, costs an arm and a leg. If you want a letter home delivered, be prepared to part with more gold dust than you'd like. Receiving a letter? That's free, assuming it actually finds you, which is about as likely as finding a gold nugget in your coffee cup. If you get sick or injured and you manage to find someone claiming to be a doctor, expect to pay heavily for the privilege of being bled, poisoned, or otherwise maltreated. The cost of a single, dubious consultation could wipe out weeks of careful saving. And heaven help you if you're fool enough to gamble. The saloons and gambling tents are expertly designed to separate you from your meager earnings. A few rounds of cards, a couple of drinks, and boom, you're broke, staring down the barrel of another season living on hope and stale beans. Historians still argue whether the true winners of the gold rush were the merchants, not the miners. Men like Levi Strauss, who sold durable trousers to desperate miners, and Samuel Brannan, who sold picks and pans, made fortunes while the majority of miners dug themselves into poverty. It's a bitter truth you can taste every time you hand over a handful of gold dust for a sack of flour that smells vaguely of mildew. You learn to budget ruthlessly, to weigh every purchase like it's a life or death decision. Do you buy food or save for a new pickaxe when yours inevitably gives out? Do you splurge on a real meal once a month or hoard your earnings for a new pair of boots before the snow hits? The small luxuries you once took for granted, soap, clean clothes, a hot meal, become distant dreams. You can barely remember what it felt like to eat fresh bread or sleep in a bed that didn't sag in the middle and smell like damp canvas and failure. But you adapt. You scrape by. You stretch what little you have as far as it will go and then a little farther. Because out here, frugality isn't just a virtue, it's a survival skill. And every morning, with an empty belly and lighter pockets, you grab your battered pickaxe and head back to the river. Because maybe, just maybe, today will be different. Spoiler, it probably won't be.
Loneliness creeps in slowly at first, like a chill you barely notice until you're shivering. Out here, in the endless sweep of wilderness and makeshift camps, you're surrounded by people and yet achingly alone. You share your tent wall with snoring strangers, your dinner fire with grumbling miners, but real companionship? That's a luxury rarer than gold itself. At first, you don't think much of it. You're busy, after all, digging, panning, scraping out a living minute by backbreaking minute. But after weeks turn into months, you realize how starved you are for real conversation, the kind that isn't about claims, gold, or the latest camp brawl. You miss the simple things, a friendly chat, a laugh shared without the gnawing worry that the other person's eyeing your pouch of dust. Letters from home are a lifeline, but they're rare and precious. Mail delivery is sporadic at best. Weeks, sometimes months pass between deliveries, and there's no guarantee your letter will even find you. When one does arrive, the camp buzzes with excitement. Men gather around the mail wagon like children at a carnival, straining to hear their names called out. When you get a letter, you hold it like treasure, fingers tracing the familiar handwriting, the edges worn soft by the journey. Historians still argue whether the mail system during the gold rush was more miracle or mess. Given the vast distances, hostile terrain, and general chaos, the fact that any letters got through at all feels like a small wonder. The letters themselves are bittersweet. News from home reminds you of what you've left behind. Family dinners, friends, the simple comfort of knowing you belong somewhere. It stings, but it also keeps you tethered to the idea that you're more than just a half-starved miner with cracked hands and a fading dream. Quirky fact, some miners paid exorbitant fees for express letters, hand-delivered by couriers on horseback. Think of it as the 1850s version of overnight shipping, wildly unreliable, but tantalizingly fast if it actually worked. When letters aren't enough, some miners turn to writing journals, scribbling away by lamplight in battered notebooks or on scraps of paper. It's a way to keep sane, to dump their frustrations and dreams onto the page when there's no one else to listen. You've thought about it yourself. Sometimes you catch yourself composing letters in your head to people who will never read them. The loneliness gnaws at you in quieter ways too. You miss the sound of laughter that isn't tinged with desperation. You miss the comfort of sitting with someone and not having to guard your words or your belongings. You even miss the arguments from back home,
the petty squabbles that now seem like a luxury compared to the grim, silent hostility of the camp. Historians still debate whether the isolation of mining life contributed to the mental decline many miners experienced. The signs are easy to spot. The man who talks to himself more and more each day. The one who sits staring into the fire long after the flames have died. The ones who simply walk away into the wilderness one day and don't come back. You get it, you really do. So you cling to the little things that keep you grounded. A worn photograph tucked into your bedroll. A carved token from home hanging around your neck. The half-remembered lyrics of a song you hum while you work. Small things, but they matter. Sometimes, just sometimes, you strike up a fragile friendship with a fellow miner. You trade stories, grumble about the weather, share a pot of miserable coffee. It's not much, but it helps. You talk about home, about what you'll do when, if you finally strike it rich. It feels good to dream out loud, even if you both know deep down it's probably just that, a dream. As night falls and the camp settles into its uneasy sleep, you lie awake, staring up at the sagging canvas above you. The wind rattles the tent, and the distant howls of coyotes echo through the hills. You think about home. You think about the people you left behind. You wonder if they miss you, if they imagine you sitting by a river full of gold instead of a muddy trickle filled with broken dreams. You pull your blanket tighter, close your eyes, and tell yourself you'll write a letter tomorrow. Maybe you will.
You get used to the loneliness, the hunger, the ceaseless ache in your muscles. What's harder to get used to is the constant looming threat from Mother Nature herself. It's not enough that the work is backbreaking and the gold elusive. You're also a walking buffet for all manner of creatures that seem personally offended by your existence. Start with the snakes. They're everywhere, curled in your boots, hidden under rocks, sunning themselves on the very trails you stagger down after a long day. Rattlesnakes are the worst. Their warning buzz the soundtrack of many miners' nightmares. You learn to walk with a heavy tread, hoping to scare them off before they strike. Still, accidents happen. A single bite can mean days of agonizing pain, and without proper medical treatment, which is to say, any medical treatment, you're gambling with your life. Historians still argue whether snakebite deaths were truly common or just feared enough to become part of miner lore. Either way, when you hear that telltale rattle, you don't stop to ask historical questions. You run. And snakes are just the opening act. There are bears too. Big ones, the kind you read about in terrifying campfire stories. They don't care about your pickaxe or your flimsy tent. If you leave food out, even a scrap, you might wake up to the sound of something large and hungry sniffing around your camp. You hear about a man downriver who forgot to tie up his supplies properly. His tent was found shredded, his food gone, and no sign of him but a torn boot. Quirky fact, some miners tried to deter bears by hanging bells around their campsites, figuring the noise would scare them off. Historians still debate whether this worked or just helped the bears locate dinner with less effort. Then there are the bugs. Oh, the bugs. Mosquitoes so big and persistent they could carry off small children, or at least make you feel like they could. Black flies swarm your face, crawl into your eyes and ears, and leave you scratching miserably for days. You try everything, smearing yourself with mud, wearing extra layers despite the heat, but nothing works for long. In the warmer months, the air hums with insects, and you find yourself constantly waving your arms in a futile attempt to keep them at bay. Sleep becomes a challenge, not just because of the hard ground and the ever-present threat of theft, but because you're itching from bites in places you didn't even know you could itch. Historians still argue whether these insects were merely a nuisance or a serious health threat, spreading diseases like malaria. Given how many miners succumb to mysterious fevers, it's safe to assume the bugs won more than a few rounds. And don't get too comfortable around the plants either. Poison oak and poison ivy are the landscape's way of reminding you that yes, even the flora out here is out to get you. One wrong brush against a seemingly innocent bush, and you're covered in an itchy, blistering rash that no amount of river water can soothe.
You become hyper-aware of your surroundings. Every rustle in the grass, every snap of a twig, every flicker of movement at the edge of your vision could mean danger. The wilderness demands respect, and sometimes even respect isn't enough to save you. Yet you adapt. You stomp heavily to warn snakes. You tie your food high in the trees, hoping to outwit the bears. You smear dubious concoctions on your skin in a vain attempt to repel insects. You even start to appreciate the company of crows and vultures. At least they don't bite. Quirky fact, some miners wore garlic necklaces, believing the smell would repel insects and maybe even other miners. Historians still argue whether it worked, though it certainly kept away anyone with a working nose. At night, as you huddle in your tent, listening to the eerie howls of coyotes and the unsettling silence that follows, you realize just how fragile you are out here. The wilderness doesn't hate you exactly. It just doesn't care whether you live or die. It's an indifference that seeps into your bones, chilling and humbling. You fall asleep clutching your pickaxe close, not just against thieves, but against the whole wild, indifferent world outside your thin canvas walls. You know that tomorrow, the snakes, the bears, the bugs will still be there. And you'll be there too, because you're just stubborn enough to keep trying.
Even if you manage to dodge disease, criminals, and nature's finest predators, the mines themselves have one last card to play, and it's not a good one. Mining accidents are so common out here, they're practically a rite of passage. Dig long enough, and you'll either have a close call or a very permanent one. The danger begins the moment you dig beneath the surface. The earth looks solid enough from above, but underground, it's a different story. Tunnels are propped up with rotting beams, hastily chopped trees, or whatever scrap wood can be found. They groan ominously, especially after a rain, and you quickly learn to fear that low, creaking warning that says the ceiling might just come crashing down on your head. Historians still argue whether the majority of tunnel collapses were due to poor engineering or sheer bad luck. Out here, the two seem indistinguishable. One day the walls are fine, the next you're scrambling for daylight as dirt and rock rain down like the sky itself is collapsing. And that's just the start. Dynamite, the latest miracle invention, is the miner's best friend and worst nightmare. Used to blast through stubborn rock, it's notoriously temperamental. Sometimes it fizzles, sometimes it explodes prematurely, sometimes it just doesn't explode at all until someone pokes it with a stick an hour later. Quirky fact, some miners believed that singing to dynamite would soothe it and prevent premature explosions. Historians still debate whether this was superstition or an early bizarre version of whistle while you work. You learn to spot the signs of a bad day underground. A sudden chill in the air, dust trickling from the ceiling, the nervous glances of fellow miners. Everyone knows what's coming, they just don't know when. And when a collapse happens, it happens fast. 1 second you're swinging your pickaxe, and the next you're buried under a mountain of regret and broken timbers. For those who survive the initial cave-in, the aftermath is its own horror story. Trapped in the dark, you sit in pitch blackness, the air growing stale, the temperature dropping. You can hear the creaks and groans of shifting earth, the muffled shouts of rescuers, if you're lucky. Sometimes rescue doesn't come at all. Then there's the danger of flooding. Hit a hidden underground spring and water rushes in faster than you can scramble out. Miners who can't swim, most of them, are at the mercy of icy, muddy torrents. It's said you can drown faster in a flooded shaft than in a river because the mud fills your mouth and nose before the water does. Fire is another menace. Candles and oil lamps are necessary for light, but one careless move and the dry timbers catch like kindling. In a confined space, fire doesn't just burn, it eats the oxygen, suffocating everyone trapped inside before the flames even reach them. Historians still argue whether miners of the era were reckless or merely desperate. Given the tools, the conditions, and the ever-present hunger for gold, caution is a luxury few can afford. Injury is almost inevitable.
Broken bones from falling rocks, crushed limbs from equipment malfunctions, deep cuts from sharpened tools, all are part of the daily grind. And without real doctors, even a minor wound can turn deadly. Infection sets in fast, and out here, medical treatment often involves a bottle of whiskey, a rusty saw, and a few strong men to hold you down. Despite all this, you keep digging. You tell yourself it won't happen to you. You're careful. You listen for the warning signs. You tie a string behind you in the tunnels so you can find your way out if the lamps fail. You leave a note with a friend just in case you don't come back. And still, deep down, you know. The earth is patient. It waits. It doesn't rush. Someday, if you dig long enough, it will get you. Quirky fact, some miners wore lucky charms, rabbit's feet, carved bones, bits of colored cloth, believing they could ward off disaster. Historians still debate whether these tokens offered real psychological comfort or were just one more desperate gamble among many. At night, you lie awake and listen to the ground settle, to the faint groans and creaks from the day's labors. You know that tomorrow you'll pick up your tools and head back into the dark, back into the mine that could very well be your grave. Because out here, fortune favors the bold, or buries them.
By now, you've come to understand a grim truth. If the gold doesn't kill you, the schemes will. Scams and shams are as common in the camps as dirt under your fingernails. If there's a way to separate you from your hard-earned gold dust, or, more likely, your hard-earned hope, someone's already thought of it. You're desperate, exhausted, half-starved, and wide open to the dream of an easier way. Enter the traveling salesman, hawking miracle cures and mining shortcuts. Bottles filled with dubious liquids claim to give you the strength of 10 men, or a sixth sense for sniffing out gold veins. One popular elixir promises to render the liver sprightly and banish melancholia. Historians still argue whether these tonics contained anything useful or were just 90% alcohol and 10% snake oil. Quirky fact, one infamous doctor sold pills made of pure mercury, claiming they would purge the body of bad humors and gold-averse spirits. Spoiler, mercury isn't good for you. Historians debate whether these hucksters knew the harm they caused or just didn't care. Then there's the gear sellers. Remember your busted pickaxe, your leaky boots? These enterprising fellows show up with wagon loads of shiny new supplies at just the right moment, at prices that would make a banker blush. Need a pan? That'll be 3 times the going rate back east. Rope? Hope you've got a vein of gold handy. They don't care if your claim is a bust. Their fortune is already made, one desperate miner at a time. More insidious are the claim brokers, those slick-talking men who promise sure-thing plots of land for sale. They'll show you shiny pebbles and sprinkle a few flakes into the pan right in front of your amazed eyes. What they don't tell you is that they salted the land beforehand, scattering gold dust to fake a lucrative find. You hand over your hard-earned savings, move in, dig for weeks, and find nothing but rocks and heartache. Historians still argue whether these scams were rampant or merely a symptom of a chaotic, unregulated rush for wealth. Either way, you learn fast that trust is dangerous currency out here, and it's always in short supply. There's the occasional self-styled prophet, too, claiming visions of gold deposits. They'll lead groups of hopefuls on wild treks into the wilderness, promising riches just over the next ridge. Most of these expeditions end with empty hands and bitter hearts, if they don't end with being lost, hungry, and miles from civilization. Even so-called partnerships are risky business. You might team up with a fellow miner to share labor and split any profits. But gold fever twists men's hearts. Agreements made in good faith collapse under the strain of suspicion and greed. More than a few partnerships end in midnight disappearances or daylight duels. Quirky fact, some camps even saw the rise of amateur geologists, men who would point at random hills and claim, with scientific-sounding jargon, that gold had to be there.
Historians still debate whether they believed their own nonsense or simply enjoyed watching desperate men scramble like ants over barren rocks. And then there are the staged card games and rigged lotteries. Newcomers still green with hope are easy prey. You see the signs from a mile away now. The too friendly invitation to a high-stakes poker game, the glint of a marked deck, the dealer's sly smile. You've learned the hard way that if you can't spot the trick, you are the trick. Every man in the camp has a scam, or has been scammed. It's a way of life, as much a part of the gold rush as pickaxes and pans. You keep your head down, your gold pouch close, and your trust locked away where no smooth talker can reach it. Historians still argue whether the true gold rush wasn't for gold at all, but for the miners themselves, a rush of opportunists eager to cash in on the gullibility and desperation of men like you. At night, as you count your meager earnings by flickering lantern light, you can't help but marvel at the creativity of it all. There's a certain grim admiration for the lengths men will go to in order to make a buck, especially when they realize the gold in the river is long gone, but there's still plenty to be made fleecing the dreamers. You know now, it's not just the land and labor conspiring against you. It's people too.
Eventually, the realization sinks in. The dream you've been chasing is slipping away like silt through your calloused fingers. The gold rush, it turns out, was never a fair race. It was a gamble, a roll of the dice where the house always wins. And for most miners, you included, the house isn't even offering consolation prizes. You start to notice the signs. Your pan grows lighter each day. Your shovel digs through more worthless dirt. And the bright promise that lured you west dulls into something heavier, something closer to regret. The weeks blur into each other, one back-breaking day after another, and all you have to show for it are empty pockets and a body that feels 20 years older than when you arrived. Historians still argue whether most miners knew how slim their chances were, or if they truly believed in the myth of easy riches. Walking back to camp with another empty pan, you suspect it was a little of both. Hope clinging to the back of realism, stubborn as a mule. Some miners accept defeat quickly. They sell what little they have left, their pans, their picks, even their tents, and book passage back east, assuming they can afford it. Others simply vanish, slipping away under cover of darkness, leaving behind only footprints and debts. A few stay too long, worn down into hollow-eyed shadows who mutter to themselves about one more lucky strike. And then there are those who can't leave because they have nothing left to leave with. You're not far from joining them. You try other angles, maybe prospect somewhere new, farther upriver or deep into the hills. But the rumors of fresh strikes are just that, rumors. You pack up, hike for days, only to find the ground just as barren, the rivers already picked clean. Quirky fact. Desperate miners sometimes even tried repanning the waste piles of more successful claims, hoping to find overlooked flakes of gold. Historians still debate whether this was ingenuity or just the last gasps of desperation. Even when gold is found, the reality is crushing. You finally haul up a nugget after weeks of labor, heart-pounding, only to discover that, after paying inflated camp prices for food and supplies, you're still in the red. Gold dust doesn't patch your boots, doesn't fix your pickaxe, doesn't cure the persistent cough that never quite goes away. The irony gnaws at you. You came here for freedom, for a fresh start, and all you found was another kind of trap. A muddy, lawless, back-breaking trap. You're not alone. The camp empties slowly at first. One tent gone here, another there. Then whole rows of tents stand abandoned, flapping lonely in the wind. The saloon shutters its windows. The blacksmith packs up his anvil. The supply wagons stop coming. The silence grows. The once raucous nights fade into hollow quiet, broken only by the lonely groan of the wind across empty lots and the distant howl of coyotes.
Historians still argue whether the end of the gold rush was inevitable or if greed simply burned itself out. Standing in the middle of an emptying camp, you feel pretty sure it was always doomed. Hope can only outrun reality for so long before it runs out of breath. You weigh your options: stay and starve, or leave and admit defeat. It's not much of a choice. Quirky fact: some miners turned to mining the miners, opening shops, saloons, or laundry services to scrape together a living from the last desperate stragglers. Historians point out that these latecomer merchants often made more than the prospectors ever did. You think about it. Maybe you could stay, sell what little you have left, set up a tent selling coffee, or something that pretends to be coffee, to the next wave of fools. But even that feels hollow. You didn't come here to scrape by. You came here to strike it rich. You look at your battered boots, your splintered shovel, your frayed tent ropes. They tell the story better than any letter home ever could. It's over. Not with a bang, not with a final lucky find, but with the slow, grinding acceptance that the dream was never really yours to claim. You pack your few remaining possessions, sling your pack over your shoulder, and turn east. It's a long walk home. As you leave the camp behind, your boots dragging in the dust, you glance back one last time. What once buzzed with the feverish energy of hundreds of gold-hungry souls is now little more than a skeleton of its former self. Tents collapse under their own weight. Wooden frames tilt drunkenly against the sky. Rusting pans and broken picks lie scattered like relics of a forgotten war. Ghost towns, they'll call them one day, silent monuments to dreams chased and lost. The West is littered with them, and this one is no different. Just another casualty of the brutal, unforgiving tide that was the gold rush. Historians still argue whether these towns were ever meant to last, or if they were always doomed to be as temporary as the promises that built them. You walk on, but the emptiness clings to you. The dirt road stretches ahead, lonely and endless. Every step away from the camp feels heavier than the last. Behind you, the town continues to crumble, disappearing into the dust and scrub brush. Along the way, you pass other forsaken places, half-built cabins abandoned mid-construction, forgotten claim markers slowly tipping over, broken wagons rusting into the earth. You wonder about the men who once lived here, who dreamed here. Did they make it home, or did they simply vanish into the vast indifference of the West? Quirky fact: some ghost towns later became tourist attractions, with hopeful entrepreneurs selling tickets to walk among the crumbling ruins. Historians still debate whether this was clever marketing or just a way to wring one last drop of profit from failure. You sleep rough, curled under a blanket that's more holes than fabric. Food is scarce, water scarcer. Your hands, once calloused from digging, are now blistered from gripping the walking stick you've carved to help you limp along. Every mile feels like two. Every day feels longer than the last. The few towns you pass through aren't much better. Some are no more than a single saloon and a trading post, clinging desperately to relevance. Others are almost as abandoned as the camp you left, their residents long gone or too worn out to bother with much besides survival. You hear stories from passing travelers, new gold strikes further north, maybe silver veins deeper in Nevada. Historians still argue whether these later rushes offered more opportunity or just more heartbreak. You're not sure you care. You've heard enough promises to last a lifetime. You meet men heading west still, wide-eyed, full of hope, pickaxes slung jauntily over their shoulders. You watch them go by with a mixture of pity and resentment. You want to stop them, to warn them, turn around. It's not what you think. But you don't. Would they even listen? Would you have listened months ago? Probably not. The land itself feels different now. The rivers you once saw as sources of wealth now look like winding reminders of how easily hope can be washed away. The mountains, so grand and promising, now seem like grim sentinels, watching with ancient, impassive eyes as another wave of humanity comes and goes. Quirky fact: some abandoned mining towns became havens for artists and writers in later years, drawn by the stark beauty and isolation. Historians debate whether this was romanticism or just a different kind of desperation. You keep walking. Some nights around the fire, you replay it all in your mind. The first hopeful step west, the first glint of fool's gold in your pan, the first time you realized you were in over your head. It's a slideshow of mistakes and lessons you never asked for, but now carry like stones in your pack. You wonder what you'll tell people when you get home, if you get home. Will you admit the truth? That you spent months fighting mud, sickness, criminals, and the earth itself for nothing but a handful of dust and a mountain of regrets? Probably not. No, you'll say you had adventures, that you faced down the wilderness and came out the other side stronger. It'll sound better that way, and maybe if you say it enough times, you'll believe it too. The West isn't kind, but it teaches you things you didn't know you needed to learn. Patience, endurance, the bitter taste of disappointment, and the stubborn will to keep moving anyway. As the sun dips behind the horizon, casting the land in a bruised purple light, you settle down for another rough night. The ground is hard, the blanket thin, but you close your eyes and drift off, the ruined camp fading into the distance behind your weary footsteps. You're not rich, you're not famous, but you're still moving. And for now, that's enough.
The further you walk, the clearer it becomes. The gold rush is over, for you and soon for everyone. What remains is the slow, quiet erosion of memory. The camps decay, the dreams fade, and the hard truth settles like dust on everything left behind. But here's the strange thing. You realize that, despite everything, the gold rush mattered. Not in the glittering, triumphant way you once believed, but in a grittier, more complicated way. It changed things. It changed you. Historians still argue whether the gold rush was a net positive or a sprawling tragedy of human greed and suffering. What's not up for debate is that it spurred the growth of the American West faster than any government initiative ever could have. Whole cities owe their existence to the ragged camps you once cursed under your breath. Railroads, banks, businesses, they sprouted from the chaos you lived through. You were part of that. A small part, sure, but part of it all the same. Quirky fact: even the abandoned camps played a role later on, providing ready-made ghost towns for early filmmakers in the 20th century. Some of the first westerns ever shot used your crumbling, forgotten streets as their sets. Historians like to point out that the myth of the rugged pioneer was polished and broadcast from the very ruins left behind by men like you. You can't help but think about that as you walk. How the dream you chased, the one that broke your back and drained your pockets, wasn't just yours. Thousands, tens of thousands shared it. It built railroads and telegraphs, drew new borders, and spurred settlements that would become the backbone of states. You remember the faces. The man who sold miracle elixirs. The friend who swore he struck gold but disappeared before he could prove it. The neighbor who taught you how to patch your boots with pine sap and prayer. Ghosts now, in a way, but ghosts who helped write a chapter of history. You wonder if anyone back home will understand. Probably not. They'll want to hear stories of riches and adventure, not of failure and frostbite. But maybe, deep down, you'll know that you were part of something bigger than just gold. Historians still debate whether it was courage or foolishness that drove the gold rush. After everything, you figure it was a little of both. Maybe more foolishness. But then again, sometimes a fool's errand changes the world. The land stretches out before you, wild and endless, as if daring you to try again, to stake a new claim, to chase a new dream. You won't, though. Some lessons only need to be learned once. You pull your coat tighter against the chill, adjust the strap of your worn pack, and keep moving eastward, toward the fading memory of home. Your boots kick up little clouds of dust that spiral briefly before settling back to earth.
like so many hopes before them. You won't leave a fortune behind, no grand legacy, but maybe, just maybe, you leave a sliver of something else, a whisper of the dream that drove so many westward, a fragment of the madness and ambition that helped carve a nation out of wilderness. You walk on, lighter somehow, even with the heavy lessons packed in your worn, battered soul. Because while you didn't find gold, you did find something. You found out who you are. Now the trail stretches behind you, fading into soft, indistinct memory, as the night air grows cooler, wrapping around you like a familiar old blanket. The harsh edges of the world blur. The sharp lines of hunger, of failure, of lost dreams soften until they're no more than gentle ripples across the pond of your mind. You feel the earth beneath you, solid and patient, the stars blinking awake above, slow and certain in their ancient rhythm. The wind no longer howls, it sighs, weaving through the ghost towns and empty camps, telling the old stories in a quieter voice now, one meant only for the night and for those willing to listen. There's a peace in it, strange and unexpected, a deep, slow breath after the fever has broken, the realization that even failure has its place, and that some journeys aren't about reaching gold at all, but about finding a kind of quiet courage you didn't know you needed. So you rest now, heavy limbs relaxing, eyes slipping closed. The dust settles, the campfires dim. The last echoes of pickaxes and panhandlers fade into the soft hum of the universe, carrying on. Sleep well, traveler. Your journey was never for nothing. Sweet dreams.